What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the NLL Flash. My name's Tino Fera, and we are here to get you set for another week of National Lacrosse League action, week number 7. But before we get there, man, it's been a busy week in the NLL in terms of transactions, news, just unbelievable. So let's go through the list of these things real quick. So Monday, just to start off the week, the Riptide, this one caught everybody by surprise. The Riptide fired general manager Jim Veltman. Executive VP Rich Lisk is going to be assuming the GM duties. That one, like I said, caught everybody off guard. Didn't expect to start off the week that way. Keeping with New York Riptide news, Lisk trades forward Jake Fox over to Panther City for their captain, their first captain in franchise history. Defenseman Chad Cummings. Looking for a little bit of a size change there. Then we'll move over to Tuesday. The Warriors parting ways with general manager Dan Richardson and assistant general manager Ken Thomas. It sounds like that was a mutual parting of the ways. The Warriors announced they'll begin their search for a new general manager immediately. For the time being, it sounds like Troy Cordingley is going to take on the general manager duties, as well as continuing his head coaching duties. And then the last one on the list here, just coming down today, the day that we're recording. It's currently Wednesday evening, but the Roughnecks acquire forward Josh Courier for the Rush, sending over a conditional draft pick in return. On top of that, Calgary also releasing newly acquired forward over the offseason, at least, Brett Hickey, in a corresponding move. So the Courier brothers coming together on Calgary now. They just need the third Courier brother, Jeff Teat. So obviously we'll expect that to be the next move that Calgary makes. I'm just kidding, of course. But yeah, busy week in terms of news in the National Lacrosse League. Moving over to week number 7, as always, we put our poll out to help decide or help get you guys to help us decide the Flash game of the week. And you guys came through once again. And I kind of saw this one coming, but either way, I'm glad it got picked. The game of the week, as voted by you guys, the fans, is going to be the rematch, or one of the rematches, of week number 7. That's going to be Halifax taking on Albany in Halifax. So that one's going to go down Friday evening. The Albany's 1-2, Halifax 3-1. That one's going to be Friday, January 13th, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern at the Scotia Bank Center. So thank you again to everybody for the contributions on that poll, and let's get fired up for a big week 7, shall we? But of course, before we get too ahead of ourselves looking into week number 7 in the NLL, we have to look back at a monstrous week number 6. 7 games, felt like all of them happened at the exact same time. So of course, like everybody, I had all my screens open. So before we get started with this week's episode, let's look back at the week that was. Let's look back at week 6. A whopping 7 games last weekend. So let's hop into a few of them right now, and we'll kick things off with our Flash game of the week from week number 6, Colorado versus Calgary. A rivalry that everybody absolutely loves. The Roughnecks headed on over to the Loud House with a plan of spoiling Colorado's banner-raising night. Jesse King silenced the crowd with his goal, the first goal of the game, 31 seconds in, and that set the tone for the rest of the first half. Calgary held the Mammoth to just 2 goals through 30 minutes. Unfortunately, though, for the Calgary faithful, Connor Robinson came alive. 4 goals in the second half, including the game winner. So Mammoth fans got to witness the raising of a banner, Reese Dutch's 1,000th point, and a massive win. Big night in Colorado. Vegas is one of the 4 still looking for their first win of the season, and they tried again in front of their home fans. There was an issue, though. Joey Rez and the Philly offense came alive. Resitaritz put up a casual 9 points, plus 6 from Ben McIntosh, and 5 more from Blaze Reardon. Blaze is the heart and soul of this team, man. I swear to God. Guy's a goalie for half of the year, and he's got 15 points here for the Wings. Philly takes this one rather easily, 14-9. If I told you the Rochester Nighthawks put up 17 goals against Panther City without Connor Fields, would you believe me? Well, it doesn't matter. You have to. The guy went on his honeymoon, and Rochester still rolled through another team. 41 saves from Hartley, plus 9 more points from Katoni. Helped push the Hawks over the top. Panther City falls 17-9. And the remaining games over the weekend, Halifax took down Albany 14-11. Buffalo rolled into Georgia and took that one 18-9. Toronto over New York 15-7. And San Diego over Vancouver 16-11. All right, joining us now to help preview the games coming up this week, as well as the NLL Flash Game of the Week, Mr. Teddy Jenner of TSN. He'll be on the call for the game. And Teddy, we haven't had a chance to talk to you since we were rolling out all of our season previews. So, I mean, A, thank you for doing this. And B, how has the season been treating you so far?
It's like I'm playing again. I was mentioning this to Stephanie, my partner, the other day. I literally haven't had a week off other than the Christmas break, and I love it, but I hate it. I was only home for 2 days this week before I had to travel to Halifax. So it's like I'm playing in the NLL again, and it's just awesome because every week I get to see firsthand some of the best lacrosse players in the world ply their trade in some of the best markets and arenas in North America. And it's just been a blast so far. And the season has been a wild one to start, to say the least.
We're going to hop into the Flash Game of the Week shortly here. But before we get to that, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. I think I probably know your answer either way. But I'd love to know, is there a team that's caught you off guard so far this year?
I think the obvious answer is Rochester. I think the way Rylan Hartley's played, I think the way that Connor Fields has, played with that chip on his shoulder and they've come out hot out of the gates. I don't think anybody really saw them being as successful right off the start as they have been. Maybe slow starts from some teams are also a little surprising. But the one that really jumps out of the pages is Rochester, leading the National Lacrosse League right now. It just boggles everyone's mind.
For sure. Now let's get into the Flash Game of the Week. Like I mentioned before, it is the Albany FireWolves taking on the Halifax Thunderbirds in Halifax. A rematch from last weekend. And going back to last season, Albany is a team that gave Halifax a ton of struggles last year. In both of those matchups last year, if I'm not mistaken, Albany held Halifax to under 8 goals in both the games. Last weekend they played, Halifax finally got over the hill. But it was a pretty dicey game at times. Albany was keeping it pretty close throughout most of the game. So, Teddy, in your eyes, what is it about Albany that matches up so well against Halifax?
Well, one is Doug Jamieson. He's always played well against him. Obviously, he didn't play last weekend. He was out on the PUP list, but Justin Getty had a fantastic game. So Doug Jamieson is one reason. But I think the other reason, in talking to some of the Halifax guys this week, is that the way Albany plays is just a little different than some other teams that they play. Their offense is always moving, whether they're moving their feet or moving the ball. They're always creating space, and it gives that defense a lot of troubles. And then they found a way to get inside and beat Warren Hill. Their transition game is incredible. I mean, they never stop moving their feet. So if Halifax is going to have success again, they're going to have to find a way to continually win the track meet against the Albany FireWolves, and they haven't done that in the past. Obviously, this past weekend, they were able to get the win. But last year, they didn't have that ability. And I think a lot of credit goes to Glenn Clark and his coaching staff, who always come up with a really strong game plan to go up against Halifax and able to pick apart their weaknesses and their tendencies and use them for their advantage.
Teddy, Ryan Benesh and Randy Stotts are two guys that came over to Halifax in the offseason, and they've just put up absurd numbers between the two of them, combining for 56 points through just 4 games so far, just adding so much to that offense. But I'm wondering what they add in your eyes off the floor as well. Obviously, we see what they add to this team offensively, but I'm wondering what you think they add to the team off the floor as well.
I think character is one. Being veterans is another. And I also think the relationship they have with some of the other guys on the team, obviously, Benny's been there before, but the relationship that Randy has with Cody, just allows them to kind of be, like bosom buddies. I don't really know if that's the word I want to use, but there's just a little lightheartedness more around this organization right now with the addition of Randy and Benny, because they're fun characters, but they're both perfectionists and they both want to win. So they bring a high competitive edge, but they also bring a bit of a relaxed atmosphere and relaxed, emotion at times. But when that game is on, it is 100% fully focused. So, on the floor, we see what they do, but off the floor, it's that leadership, it's that preparation, and it's just that camaraderie that they have with some of the other guys on that roster.
Bosom buddies is going to have to be trademarked going forward. We will be printing those shirts immediately. Again, looking back to last season with Halifax specifically, I want to ask you how this season looks to be different, or if you see it to be any different from what Halifax was able to do last year, because the start was very similar. And then around halfway through the year, they sort of started to fizzle out a little bit, or they were having some trouble scoring. And then they still found a way to make it to the playoffs, but ultimately fell short against Toronto. This year, like I said, the start is very similar, but the vibe seems very different around this team. It seems like they're poised to correct some of those mistakes from last season that they were making. Do you feel the same way? Do you think that the vibe around Halifax is any different? And can you kind of put a finger on why that is?
Well, as Patty Gregoire would say, vibes are high around the Thunderbirds. And I think one of the things is they're healthy. The additions of Benny and Randy obviously helps, but they're healthy. They've got 7 guys out that front door that are contributing every night. Bushi's leading their team with 13 goals. Like, when you look at their offense, you probably wouldn't think that he'd be the guy leading. So they're getting tons of contribution. Their power play is finally actually working. Where last year they were the last in the league. Now they're one of the top teams in the National Lacrosse League with the man advantage. So, being healthy, getting some new faces into that lineup, getting that power play working, and just, to steal their line, unfinished business. And that's going to be huge for this organization moving forward. They have a lot to prove. A lot of people year after year after year say Halifax is going to be the team. It's their year. Well, I think a lot of those guys truly believe it this year. And with the additions of the guys that they have and, getting a young body like Max Wilson into the lineup to inject some energy is huge for them. And so I expect big things from Halifax as the season goes on. But, to start the year, it's a perfect start for them. And they just have to keep moving forward one game at a time.
This weekend for Halifax is going to be such a tough one. And you might, as a former player yourself, you might be the perfect analyst to ask this question to. When guys are preparing for a week, usually they're just preparing for one game on the weekend. In Halifax's case, they're now preparing for a game Friday night and then Saturday night as well. 2 games in 2 nights. How does that change the preparation throughout the week when you have to put your body through that kind of wear and tear?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits they're going to have is the fact that they played Albany last weekend, so they don't have to do as much preparation for Albany in a game sense. They just have to go out and kind of play that game and fine-tune some things. Everybody from Albany or from Halifax that we talked this week all understood the task at hand, and that task is you have to win the Albany game first, or that Toronto game really, puts you behind the 8 ball. You want to be kind of playing with house money going into that second game. And, of course, everyone's going to be thinking about that Toronto game. It's a hometown game for a lot of those guys. A lot of family, a lot of friends are going to be in attendance. And it's going to be a marquee matchup in the Eastern Conference. But if they lay an egg at home, they have to sit on that whole night, that whole flight the next morning, all the way leading up to that game against Toronto. And it's going to be in their back of the mind if they have just an absolute stinker. So they have to be focused on that first game. Let the Toronto game worry about itself when the time comes, but it's all got to be focused on Albany. And you have to make sure, you got tons of water in your hotel room for after. You got to have food after the game. You got to have, your leg compression sleeves and all those little nuanced tricks of the trade that guys are doing now to heal the body and make sure that you're ready as best you can. I'm sure we'll probably see a couple different faces in the lineup from Friday to Saturday night, get some fresh bodies and fresh legs in there. But I think Halifax will be ready. They know they can't, drop 2 this weekend, and they especially can't afford to split a season series with Halifax, in week 7.
Teddy, earlier in the week, Ty Merrill on his latest Flash Stats article tweeted out trying to ask of the 4 remaining 0-4 teams, we're getting away from the Flash game now. We're looking at the other games, but of the remaining 4 teams in the league, being Georgia, New York, Vegas, and Vancouver, that are still looking for their first win of the season. Ty asked who's going to be the first one to get it, and this weekend Vegas and Vancouver are playing each other, so it's for sure going to be one of them. But in your opinion, I guess just answer the question, of those 4 teams, who's going to be the first to get their first win?
I originally said New York, but I kind of have to agree with Ty that it's going to be someone in that Vegas-Vancouver game, obviously. And I think it's going to be Vancouver. I think there's a lot of pissed off guys in that organization right now with everything that's happened. Obviously, the news of Dan Richardson and Ken Thomas leaving the team, it kind of puts an air of mystery around the franchise. But I think that group is ready to start winning games. And they've got Vegas twice. They've got Panther City coming up before they have a really tough February with Calgary and Saskatchewan. So they need wins, and they need them now. And if they don't, I don't even know what's going to happen with that franchise if they lose these next couple of games. But I think Vancouver gets a win over Vegas at home this weekend. They can start to turn the ball around, start to get some wins and momentum. And that's going to be huge for a franchise that's in a little, disrepair right now.
Teddy, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the NLL Flash. You, of course, you're heading out east this weekend on the call for Halifax versus Albany. You'll have your man, Patty Gregoire, the OTCB boys, combining for another broadcast alongside Ashley Docking. So good luck on the call on TSN this weekend, and thank you so much for doing this.
Appreciate you, brother. It's a terrible jersey.
All right. Thank you again very much to Teddy Jenner of TSN. He'll, of course, be covering, like we mentioned, the Halifax-Albany game alongside Mr. Pat Gregoire and Ashley Docking on the broadcast. But there are 7 remaining games going on this weekend for us to get you set for. So let's go through them now. We'll go through them in chronological order here, of course. So the other game on Friday night, the only other game on Friday night, Saskatchewan at Colorado. That one's 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern at Ball Arena. Then we get to kick things off here on Saturday. And once again, I hope you have your screens ready, because a lot of these coming in at the same time. So the first game of the night on Saturday, Halifax's second game of the weekend, Halifax at Toronto, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. That one's in Toronto at the First Ontario Centre. Same time on Saturday, Panther City at Philly. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern at the Wells Fargo Center. Let's move over to the 4:30 time slot now. Also on Saturday, Georgia in another rematch of the weekend. Georgia taking on Buffalo in Buffalo. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. That's at the KeyBank Center. Next up on Saturday, San Diego taking on Calgary in Calgary. That one's at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern at the Saddle Dome in Calgary. And to close out the Saturday, Las Vegas at Vancouver in Rogers Arena. That one's 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Sunday lacrosse. We are closing out the weekend on Sunday. Rochester taking on the Riptide in New York. That one's at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. A nice Sunday matinee at the Nassau Coliseum in New York. All right, and that'll do it for the remaining games here. So a big week 7 coming up here in the NLL, and it's shaping up to be a good one. So get your screens ready, get your popcorn ready, get your beverages of choice ready, and get set for a weekend full of National Lacrosse League action. I can't wait. That's going to do it here for us at the NLL Flash. For everybody involved, thanks again to Teddy Jenner for joining us for another episode. He's been a big contributor here on the NLL Flash, including going back to his season previews and so on and so on. So thank you very much to Mr. Tedward Jenner. For the whole crew here that puts this on, I've been Tino Fera, and we will see you